Step into History Page, where Agatha Christie's Hercule Poirot brings timeless mysteries to life. In the shadowed halls of Willow Grange, a single gunshot shatters the silence of a misty autumn night. Sir Reginald Harrowby, a wealthy recluse, lies dead in his locked study, his own revolver beside him. Was it suicide or a cunning murder? Who among the elegant guests, his secretive sister, the nervous heiress, the guarded doctor, the defensive stockbroker, or the silent widow, holds the key to a deadly secret? As whispers of hidden debts, a tragic accident, and a long-buried scandal surface, only one man can unravel the truth: Hercule Poirot, the brilliant Belgian detective. With his little gray cells, he probes a web of lies where every clue points to betrayal and every suspect hides a motive. Will Poirot uncover the killer before the shadows of Willow Grange claim another victim? Dive into a classic Agatha Christie-style mystery where suspense, deception, and a shocking twist await in this 15-chapter tale of murder and redemption. Chapter 1. The Unassuming Invitation. In the crisp autumn of 1925, the quaint village of St. Mary's Hollow lay nestled in the folds of the English countryside, its cobbled streets and ivy-clad cottages exuding a deceptive tranquility. The village, though small, boasted a single grand residence: Willow Grange, a sprawling Georgian manor, owned by the wealthy but reclusive Sir Reginald Harrowby. It was here, amid the golden hues of falling leaves and the faint chime of the church bell, that Captain Arthur Hastings found himself summoned on a matter of some delicacy. Hastings, ever the loyal companion to the illustrious Hercule Poirot, had received a letter from Sir Reginald himself, penned in a precise, almost fastidious hand. The invitation was peculiar, not for its content but for its tone, an urgency veiled in politeness, requesting Hastings' presence at Willow Grange for a weekend gathering. The letter hinted at a matter requiring discretion, though it offered no specifics. Intrigued, and sensing an opportunity to rouse his friend Poirot from the monotony of their London routine, Hastings had persuaded the detective to accompany him. The journey to St. Mary's Hollow was uneventful, save for Poirot's fastidious complaints about the dust on the train carriage windows and the inelegance of the rural station's wooden bench. "Mon ami," Poirot had remarked, adjusting his perfectly waxed mustache. "The English countryside, it is charming, oui, but it lacks the order, the symmetry of a well-kept mind." Hastings, accustomed to such pronouncements, merely smiled and steered their hired car toward Willow Grange. The manor itself was a vision of faded grandeur. Its stone facade, weathered by time, stood proud against a backdrop of ancient willows, their branches swaying in the October breeze. As Hastings and Poirot approached, the heavy oak door swung open to reveal Sir Reginald Harrowby. A tall greeting was warm, but tinged with a nervous energy that Hastings found unsettling. "Captain Hastings, Monsieur Poirot, I am most grateful for your coming," Sir Reginald said, ushering them into a grand hall adorned with ancestral portraits and a gleaming chandelier. "I trust the journey was not too taxing." "Pas du tout," Poirot replied, his eyes already scanning the room with the precision of a jeweler examining a gem. "But Sir Reginald, your letter, it speaks of a matter most delicate. Perhaps you will enlighten us." Sir Reginald hesitated, his fingers twitching at his cufflinks. "All in good time, Monsieur Poirot. First, allow me to introduce you to my guests. They are gathered in the drawing room." The drawing room was a study in contrasts, opulent yet stifling, with heavy velvet curtains and a fire crackling in the hearth. The assembled company was a curious mix, each member radiating a distinct air of unease. Lady Eleanor Harrowby, Sir Reginald's younger sister, sat poised on a divan, her auburn hair swept into an elegant chignon. Her eyes, however, darted nervously toward the door. Beside her was Dr. Malcolm Trent, the village physician, a wiry man with a habit of adjusting his spectacles. Across the room, lounging with an air of studied indifference, was Victor Crane, a stockbroker and Sir Reginald's financial advisor, his sharp features softened by a practiced smile. Miss Clara Winthrop, a young heiress and Sir Reginald's ward, fidgeted with her pearl necklace, her youthful beauty marred by a furrowed brow. Lastly, there was Mrs. Beatrice Langston, a widowed cousin of Sir Reginald's, whose stern demeanor and black mourning attire seemed to cast a shadow over the room. The introductions were made with the usual pleasantries, but Hastings sensed an undercurrent of tension. Poirot, ever observant, inclined his head politely to each guest, his green eyes gleaming with curiosity. "A most charming assembly," he remarked, though Hastings knew his friend was already cataloguing every gesture, every glance. Dinner was announced shortly after, and the party moved to the dining room, where a long mahogany table gleamed under candlelight. The meal was exquisite: roast pheasant, glazed vegetables, and a fine claret. But the conversation was stilted. Sir Reginald spoke of his recent acquisition of a rare manuscript, a topic that seemed to bore Victor Crane and unsettle Clara Winthrop. Lady Eleanor, meanwhile, deflected questions about her recent travels with vague replies, while Dr. Trent offered dry remarks about the health of the village populace. Mrs. Langston, silent for much of the meal, fixed her gaze on Sir Reginald with an intensity that made Hastings uneasy. It was during the dessert course, as the butler served a delicate lemon soufflé, that Sir Reginald cleared his throat. "My friends," he began, his voice steady but strained, "there is a financial matter, that requires our attention. I have discovered discrepancies in my accounts, sums unaccounted for, and I intend to resolve this before it escalates." A hush fell over the table. Victor Crane's fork paused mid-air. Lady Eleanor's hand trembled slightly, and Clara Winthrop's eyes widened. Dr. Trent adjusted his spectacles, while Mrs. Langston's lips tightened into a thin line. Poirot, seated at the far end, raised an eyebrow but said nothing, his fingers steepled before him. "Discrepancies?" Victor Crane said at last, his tone light but edged with defensiveness. "Surely, Sir Reginald, your accounts are in order? I oversee them myself." "Indeed," Sir Reginald replied, his eyes narrowing, "and yet the numbers do not lie. Tomorrow I shall engage an auditor. Until then I ask for your patience and your cooperation." The room seemed to grow colder, the fire's warmth no match for the chill of suspicion. Hastings glanced at Poirot, who was studying the guests with an almost imperceptible smile. "Mon ami," Poirot murmured to Hastings, "the little grey cells, they are already at work. There is much here that is not as it seems." As the evening drew to a close, the guests retired to their rooms, each casting wary glances at the others. Hastings and Poirot were shown to adjacent guest chambers on the second floor, each furnished with heavy oak furniture and damask curtains. Before parting, Poirot paused at Hastings' door. "Observe, Hastings," he said softly, "in a house such as this, where wealth and secrets intertwine, the truth is rarely far from the surface, yet it is always well hidden." Hastings nodded, though he felt a prickle of unease. The manor, with its creaking floors and shadowed corridors, seemed to pulse with secrets. As he prepared for bed, he could not shake the feeling that Sir Reginald's announcement had set something in motion, something that would not be easily undone. The clock in the hall struck midnight, its chimes echoing through the silent house. Hastings drifted into an uneasy sleep, unaware that the events of the next day would plunge Willow Grange into chaos and call upon Hercule Poirot's unparalleled genius to unravel a web of deceit. Chapter 2. The Shadow of Death. The dawn broke over Willow Grange with a deceptive serenity, the morning mist curling around the ancient willows like a shroud. Captain Hastings awoke to the distant crowing of a rooster, his sleep troubled by vague dreams of locked doors and whispered secrets. The events of the previous evening, Sir Reginald's cryptic announcement about financial discrepancies, lingered in his mind. casting a pall over the otherwise idyllic countryside setting. He dressed quickly, eager to discuss the matter with Hercule Poirot, whose knack for unraveling human motives was unmatched. Descending the grand staircase, Hastings found hushed efficiency, their faces drawn, and the air seemed thick with unspoken tension. In the dining room, a modest breakfast of toast, kippers, and tea had been laid out, but only Dr. Malcolm Trent and Miss Clara Winthrop were present. Clara, pale and fidgeting with her napkin, offered a weak smile as Hastings entered. Dr. Trent, peering over his spectacles, nodded curtly. "Good morning, Captain," Clara said, her voice trembling slightly. "I trust you slept well." "Well, enough, thank you," Hastings replied, noting her unease. "Though the house seems rather subdued this morning. Where is Sir Reginald?" Dr. Trent cleared his throat. "Our host has not yet risen, it seems. Unusual for him. He's typically an early riser. Perhaps he's attending to that business he mentioned last night." Hastings frowned, sensing something amiss. Before he could press further, Poirot entered, his impeccable attire, a crisp suit and polished shoes, contrasting sharply with the somber mood. His eyes, sharp and green, swept the room, taking in every detail. "Bonjour, mes amis," he said, his tone light but his gaze intense. "The morning, it is most beautiful, yet I sense a certain disquiet. Where, may I ask, is Sir Reginald?" Clara's hands twisted in her lap, and Dr. Trent adjusted his spectacles unnecessarily. "As I was just saying," the doctor began, "he has not yet come down. Perhaps—" Their conversation was interrupted by a piercing scream from upstairs, sharp and raw, cutting through the morning stillness. Hastings leapt to his feet, his military instincts kicking in, while Poirot's expression hardened into one of acute focus. Without a word, the two men hurried toward the source of the sound, followed closely by Clara and Dr. Trent. The scream had come from the second floor, near Sir Reginald's private study. As they reached the landing, they found Lady Eleanor Harrowby standing in the doorway, her face ashen, her hands clutching the frame for support. "Oh, God," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Reginald, he's dead." Hastings pushed past her, Poirot at his heels. The study was a spacious room, lined with bookshelves and dominated by a heavy oak desk. Sir Reginald Harrowby lay slumped in his leather chair, his head tilted back at an unnatural angle. A thin trickle of blood ran from a wound at his temple, staining the blotting paper on the desk. A small revolver lay on the floor beside him, its barrel gleaming dully in the morning light. The window behind the desk was ajar, admitting a faint breeze that stirred the curtains. Poirot knelt beside the body, his movements precise and deliberate. "Do not touch anything, Hastings," he cautioned, his voice low. "The scene, it must remain undisturbed." He examined Sir Reginald's weapon. "It is not as simple as it appears, Hastings." His heart pounding, glanced at the others. Lady Eleanor had sunk into a chair, sobbing quietly, while Clara clung to Dr. Trent's arm, her eyes wide with horror. Mrs. Beatrice Langston appeared in the doorway, her stern face betraying no emotion, though her hands were clenched tightly. Victor Crane, the last to arrive, stood frozen, his usual composure replaced by a pallor that matched the mist outside. "Murder," Dr. Trent said hoarsely, breaking the silence. "It must be. No man shoots himself at that angle." "Or perhaps," Poirot said, rising and brushing his hands, "it is meant to look like murder, or suicide. We shall see." He turned to the butler, who had appeared silently behind Mrs. Langston. "Monsieur, summon the police at once, and ensure no one leaves this house." The butler nodded and hurried away. Poirot's gaze swept the room, lingering on each face. "Mesdames et messieurs," he said, his voice calm but commanding. "A crime has been committed here. Until the police arrive, I, Hercule Poirot, shall take charge. No one is to enter this room, and no one is to leave Willow Grange. Is that understood?" There were murmurs of assent, though Hastings noted the flicker of fear in Clara's eyes, the tightening of Victor Crane's jaw, and the cold stare of Mrs. Langston. Lady Eleanor, still trembling, whispered, "Who could have done this?" Reginald had no enemies. Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. "No enemies, madame? That, I think, is rarely true of a man with wealth and secrets. Now, let us retire to the drawing-room. There is much to discuss." As the group filed out, Hastings lingered, watching Poirot take a final survey of the scene. The detective paused by the desk, his fingers hovering over a small brass key that lay half-hidden beneath a ledger. "Tiens," he said softly, slipping the key into his pocket with a handkerchief. "A detail most interesting. Come, Hastings, we must begin." In the drawing-room, the atmosphere was thick with suspicion. The police, summoned from the nearby town of Market Drayton, arrived within the hour, led by Inspector Grayson, a gruff man with a no-nonsense demeanor. He listened as Poirot outlined the situation, his brow furrowing at the detective's insistence on preserving the scene. "We'll handle it from here, Mr. Poirot," Grayson said, though his tone suggested he was not entirely displeased to have the famous detective's assistance. Poirot, undeterred, began his inquiries. He questioned each guest about their movements the previous night, noting their alibis with meticulous care. Lady Eleanor claimed to have retired to her room at 10 o'clock, exhausted from the evening's tension. Medical journal, while Mrs. Langston insisted she had gone to bed immediately after dinner and heard nothing. "And you, Monsieur Crane," Poirot said, fixing the stockbroker with a piercing stare. "You were in the library until what hour?" "1:30, perhaps 2, Crane replied, his voice steady, but his eyes flickering. "I was preoccupied." "Preoccupied," Poirot repeated, his tone neutral. "With papers, you say? Papers that, perhaps, relate to Sir Reginald's accounts?" Crane flushed. "I resent the implication, Poirot. I've managed his investments for years. If there were discrepancies, I'd know." "Précisément," Poirot said, his smile enigmatic. "And yet there are discrepancies. And now there is murder." As the morning wore on, the police cordoned off the study, and Poirot continued his observations, noting the layout of the house, the position of each guest's room, and the accessibility of the study's window. Hastings, assisting as best he could, felt a growing sense of unease. The clues were there. Poirot's keen eye missed nothing. But the truth remained elusive, hidden in the shadows of Willow Grange. By midday, Inspector Grayson confirmed what Poirot had suspected. The wound was inconsistent with suicide. The revolver, a .32 caliber, had been fired from a distance of at least a foot, and the absence of powder burns on Sir Reginald's hand ruled out self-infliction. "Murder, then," Grayson said grimly. "But who? And why?" Poirot, standing by the drawing-room window, gazed out at the mist-shrouded willows. "Why, Inspector, is always the key. Find the motive, and the murderer will follow. And I, Hercule Poirot, shall find it." Hastings watched his friend, marveling at the quiet confidence that radiated from him. The stage was set, the players assembled, and the game of deduction had begun. But as the day unfolded, Hastings could not shake the feeling that the truth, when revealed, would be far darker than any of them could imagine. Chapter 3. The Arrival of Hercule Poirot. The morning mist had begun to lift from Willow Grange, revealing the stark outlines of the ancient willows and the somber gray of the manor's stone facade. Inside, the drawing-room buzzed with a tense energy. the air heavy with the weight of Sir Reginald Harrowby's murder. Captain Hastings sat near the fire, his notebook open, jotting down observations as Hercule Poirot, with his characteristic precision, took command of the scene. The police, under Inspector Grayson's direction, were busy upstairs, photographing the study and cataloging evidence, but Poirot had insisted on conducting his own inquiries in parallel. The police, they are thorough. Malcolm Trent, Victor Crane, Miss Clara Winthrop, and Mrs. Beatrice Langston sat in a loose semicircle, their faces a study in varied emotions: grief, fear, defiance, and suspicion. Poirot's green eyes moved from one to the next, missing nothing. Hastings, watching his friend, knew that beneath the detective's calm exterior, a whirlwind of deduction was already in motion. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice soft but commanding, "a tragedy has occurred in this house, and it is my intention to uncover the truth. Sir Reginald Harrowby was murdered, and the murderer, I am certain, is among us." A murmur rippled through the group, but Poirot raised a hand to silence it. "I ask for your cooperation. Each of you will recount your movements last night, with precision. The smallest detail, it may be the key to unlocking this mystery." Lady Eleanor, still pale from her discovery of the body, spoke first. "I retired to my room at 10 o'clock, she said, her voice trembling. "I was overwrought by Reginald's talk of financial discrepancies. I took a sleeping draught and heard nothing until the scream this morning." Her hands twisted a lace handkerchief, and Hastings noted the faint tremor in her fingers. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "And the sleeping draught, madam, it was effective?" "Quite," she replied, though her eyes flicked briefly to Victor Crane, who sat across from her, his posture rigid. Crane was next, his tone clipped. "As I told you earlier, Monsieur Poirot, I was in the library until nearly 2. I was reviewing some documents. Personal matters, not Sir Reginald's accounts." He met Poirot's gaze with a challenge, but Hastings noticed a bead of sweat on his brow, despite the cool room. Miss Clara Winthrop, her youthful face drawn, spoke hesitantly. "I couldn't sleep. I was in my room, pacing, until perhaps 2:30. I heard nothing unusual, but I felt uneasy. Reginald's announcement at dinner, it upset me." Her fingers toyed with her pearl necklace, and Hastings wondered what lay behind her nervous demeanor. Dr. Trent adjusted his spectacles, his voice steady but guarded. "I was in my room, reading until midnight. A medical journal. Nothing of note. I heard no disturbances." His brevity seemed deliberate, and Poirot's eyes lingered on him for a moment longer than necessary. Mrs. Beatrice Langston, her black mourning attire stark against the room's rich colors, spoke last. "I went to bed immediately after dinner, at 9:30. I slept soundly and heard nothing until the commotion this morning." Her voice was cold, almost defiant, and Hastings noted the way her gaze avoided Poirot's. Poirot paced slowly before the fireplace, his hands clasped behind his back. "Merci, mes amis. Your accounts are most illuminating. But let us consider the facts. Sir Reginald was shot in his study, sometime between midnight and 3 o'clock. The preliminary findings of Inspector Grayson. The revolver, it was his own, kept in a locked drawer. The key to that drawer, it was found on his desk. Curious, no? Why would a man unlock his drawer, only to be shot with his own weapon? Victor Crane shifted uncomfortably. Perhaps he was examining the revolver when the killer surprised him. "Perhaps," Poirot said, his tone neutral. "Or perhaps the killer wished us to believe so." The window, it was ajar. An outsider, you think? Yet the grounds show no signs of intrusion, and the servants report no strangers. He paused, his eyes narrowing. "No, the answer lies within this house." Hastings, scribbling in his notebook, felt a chill. The closed circle of suspects, the isolated manner, it was precisely the kind of puzzle Poirot thrived on. But the tension in the room was palpable. each guest eyeing the others with suspicion. Poirot, undeterred, continued his inquiries, asking about relationships with Sir Reginald, financial ties, and any recent disputes. Lady Eleanor admitted to occasional disagreements with her brother over the management of Willow Grange, but insisted they were minor. Victor Crane, as Sir Reginald's financial advisor, claimed their relationship was professional and amicable, though his defensive tone suggested otherwise. Clara revealed that Sir Reginald had been her guardian since her parents' death, controlling her inheritance until she came of age next year, a fact that seemed to weigh heavily on her. Dr. Trent, who had attended Sir Reginald for years, denied any personal conflicts, while Mrs. Langston, tight-lipped, said only that she and Sir Reginald had grown distant since her husband's death. As the questioning drew to a close, Poirot produced the small brass key he had found in the study, holding it delicately in his gloved hand. "This key," he said, "it unlocks not only a drawer, but perhaps a secret. Who among you knows its significance?" The room fell silent, but Hastings caught a fleeting glance between Clara and Dr. Trent, quickly masked. Lady Eleanor's handkerchief twisted tighter, and Victor Crane's jaw clenched. Mrs. Langston remained impassive, her eyes fixed on the fire. Before anyone could respond, Inspector Grayson entered, his face grim. "Monsieur Poirot, a word. We've found something in the study, a letter, half burned in the fireplace. It mentions a debt, a substantial one, owed to someone in this house." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A debt, you say? Most interesting. Show me, Inspector." The letter, charred at the edges, was barely legible, but a few phrases stood out. "Repay what is owed," and
"Clue, but not the whole truth. The murderer they wish to distract us with debts and motives, but the little grey cells, they see beyond the obvious. Observe the alibis, Hastings. They are too neat, too precise. Someone is lying." Hastings nodded, though the complexity of the case was already dizzying. "But who, Poirot? They all seem to have something to hide." "Précisément," Poirot replied, a faint smile playing on his lips. "And that, my friend, is why we must dig deeper. The truth, it is like a pearl in an oyster, hidden, but there for those who know where to look." As the afternoon wore on, Poirot requested a map of the house from the butler, studying the layout of the rooms and corridors with meticulous care. He noted the proximity of the study to the guest rooms, the accessibility of the window, and the creaking floorboards that might betray a nighttime visitor. Hastings, assisting, felt a growing admiration for his friend's methodical approach. Every detail, from the angle of the bullet to the placement of the key, was a piece of the puzzle, and Poirot was assembling it with relentless precision. By evening, the house was under a strange spell. Grief mingled with suspicion, silence punctuated by the occasional creak of the old manor. Poirot, undaunted, continued his observations, his mind already sifting through the web of lies and half-truths. Hastings, watching him, knew that the Belgian detective was only beginning to unravel the mystery of Willow Grange, and that the truth, when it emerged, would be as shocking as it was inevitable. Chapter 4. The questions deepen. The late afternoon light filtered through the heavy curtains of Willow Grange's drawing room, casting long shadows that seemed to mirror the growing unease among its occupants. Hercule Poirot, his small figure impeccable in a tailored suit, stood before the assembled guests, his green eyes sharp and unrelenting. Captain Hastings, seated near the window with his notebook, marveled at his friend's ability to command a room, turning suspicion and fear into tools of deduction. The murder of Sir Reginald Harrowby had transformed the manor into a crucible of secrets, and Poirot was determined to uncover them. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice soft yet piercing, "we are gathered to discuss the tragic events of last night. Sir Reginald was murdered, shot with his own revolver, in a room locked from the inside, save for an open window. The police, they search for footprints, for traces of an intruder. But I, Hercule Poirot, believe the truth lies closer. Within this very house. His gaze swept over the group, lingering on each face. Lady Eleanor's pale, tear-streaked visage. Victor Crane's tightly controlled expression. Clara Winthrop's nervous fidgeting. Doctor. Malcolm Trent's guarded demeanour. And Mrs. Beatrice Langston's icy composure. Inspector Grayson, standing by the door, nodded grudgingly. We found no sign.
Forced entry, Mr. Poirot. The window was ajar, but the ground below is undisturbed. If it was an inside job, we need to know who had access to that study and that gun. Précisément, Poirot said, clasping his hands behind his back. Let us begin with the revolver. Sir Reginald kept it in a locked drawer, oui? The key to that drawer was found on his desk beside his body. Who among you knew of this weapon? A heavy silence followed. Lady Eleanor spoke first, her voice barely above a whisper. I knew of it. Reginald showed it to me years ago, after a burglary in the village. He said it was for protection, but he rarely mentioned it again. Victor Crane cleared his throat. I was aware of it as well. Sir Reginald discussed his security measures with me, given my role in his financial affairs. But I never saw him use it. Clara Winthrop's eyes widened, her fingers tightening around her pearl necklace. I didn't know about the gun. Reginald never spoke of such things to me. Her voice faltered, and Hastings noted the faint flush on her cheeks, as if she feared her ignorance might be questioned. Dr. Trent adjusted his spectacles, his tone measured. As his physician, I knew he kept a revolver, but only in passing. He was a cautious man, not prone to violence. Mrs. Langston's lips pursed. I had no knowledge of any firearm, she said curtly. Reginald and I rarely discussed such matters. Poirot's eyes narrowed slightly, but he nodded. Very well. Now, let us consider the time. The shot, it was fired between midnight and 3, according to the medical evidence. Where were each of you during this window? The alibis were repeated, each guest clinging to their earlier statements. Lady Eleanor had taken a sleeping draught and retired at 10. Victor Crane was in the library until 2. Clara paced her room until 2:30. Dr. Trent read until midnight. Mrs. Langston slept from 9:30 onward. Yet Poirot's expression suggested he found these accounts too tidy, too rehearsed. Curieux, he murmured, pacing slowly before the fireplace. All of you so conveniently occupied, yet no one hears a shot in the dead of night. A revolver, it is not silent, no? And the study, it is not so far from your rooms. He paused, his gaze settling on Clara. Mademoiselle Winthrop, you were awake until 2:30, pacing. Did you perhaps hear a creak, a footstep, a door? Clara's hands trembled. I don't think so. I was so preoccupied I might not have noticed. Her eyes darted to Dr. Trent, who looked away quickly. Poirot's attention shifted to the doctor. Monsieur Trent, as a physician you are observant, oui? Did nothing see the wheels turning in his friend's mind? The detective produced the small brass key from his pocket, holding it up to the light. This key, he said. It unlocked the drawer containing the revolver. Yet, it was found on the desk, not in the lock. Why, do you think? Would Sir Reginald leave it so? Victor Crane spoke up, his voice sharp. Perhaps he was interrupted. The killer could have entered, startled him, and yet, Poirot interrupted, the room shows no signs of struggle. The papers on the desk, they are orderly. The chair, it is not overturned. No, Monsieur Crane, this was not a sudden attack. It was planned, methodical. A gasp escaped Clara, quickly stifled. Lady Eleanor's handkerchief was now a crumpled mass.
and Mrs. Langston's eyes narrowed, though she said nothing. Inspector Grayson, growing impatient, interjected. "Mr. Poirot, we've searched the study thoroughly. Aside from the letter about a debt, there's little to go on. We need more than theories." "Patience, Inspector," Poirot said, his tone mild but firm. "Theories, they are the scaffolding of truth. Let us now examine the letter." He gestured to Grayson, who produced the charred fragment found in the fireplace. The words, "repay what is owed," and "before it is too late," stood out starkly, though the signature was lost to the flames. "Who owed Sir Reginald a debt?" Poirot asked, his eyes scanning the group. "Or perhaps, who did he owe?" Victor Crane's jaw tightened. "If you're implying I mismanaged his funds, Poirot, I resent it. My accounts are impeccable." "Impeccable, perhaps," Poirot said, "but Sir Reginald spoke of discrepancies. Were they yours, monsieur, or another's?" Crane's face reddened, but he said nothing. Lady Eleanor spoke up, her voice shaking. "Reginald was generous, too generous at times. He lent money to friends, to family. Perhaps someone couldn't repay." Poirot's gaze softened, but only slightly. "Generosity, madame. It can breed resentment as easily as gratitude. Tell me, who benefited from his wealth?" The question hung in the air, unanswered. Hastings scribbled in his notebook, noting the subtle shifts in posture, the glances exchanged. Clara's nervousness seemed to intensify, while Dr. Trent's calm was almost too perfect. Mrs. Langston's silence, Hastings thought, was as telling as any outburst. Poirot turned to the butler, who hovered near the door. "Monsieur, the study. Did Sir Reginald often work there late at night?" The butler, a stooped man named Jenkins, nodded. "Yes, sir. Sir Reginald was often in his study past midnight, especially when troubled. He was there last night, I believe, when I locked up at 11. And the window?" Triumphant. "So, the window was opened after 11. By whom? The murderer, perhaps, to suggest an outsider, or Sir Reginald himself, for reasons unknown?" As the questioning continued, Poirot requested a detailed map of the house, which Jenkins provided. The detective studied it intently, noting the study's proximity to the guest rooms and the narrow staircase leading to the servants' quarters. "The corridors," he said to Hastings, "they are the arteries of this house. They carry secrets as surely as blood." By evening, the atmosphere in Willow Grange was stifling. The police had cordoned off the study, but Poirot's inquiries had stirred the guests' nerves. Hastings, watching his friend, felt a mix of admiration and frustration. Poirot's methods were meticulous, but the truth seemed no closer. Yet he knew better than to doubt the little Belgian. The clues, the key, the letter, the open window, were pieces of a puzzle only Poirot could assemble. As the group dispersed for dinner, Poirot drew Hastings aside. "Mon ami," he whispered, "observe the small things." The glance between Mademoiselle Winthrop and Dr. Trent. The tension in Monsieur Crane's voice. "They hide more than they reveal. Tonight we watch, and tomorrow we dig deeper." Hastings nodded, his mind racing. The manor, with its creaking floors and shadowed corners, seemed to pulse with secrets. As the clock struck 7, signaling dinner, he felt a growing certainty that Poirot was closing in on the truth, and that the murderer, whoever they were, was watching just as closely. Chapter 5. The Red Herrings. The dining room at Willow Grange was a somber stage that evening, its long mahogany table gleaming under the chandelier's muted glow. The air was thick with suspicion, each guest casting wary glances as they took their seats for dinner. Captain Hastings, seated across from Hercule Poirot, felt the weight of the day's events pressing upon him. Sir Reginald Harrowby's murder had cast a shadow over the manor, and Poirot's relentless inquiries had only deepened the unease. The detective, however, appeared unruffled, his eyes bright with the quiet intensity of a predator stalking its prey. The meal, roast lamb with rosemary, accompanied by a claret that no one seemed to taste, was served with mechanical precision by the butler Jenkins, whose face betrayed a flicker of strain. The conversation was stilted, punctuated by long silences. Lady Eleanor Harrowby, her auburn hair slightly disheveled, toyed with her fork, her eyes avoiding the empty chair at the head of the table where Sir Reginald had presided the previous night. Victor Crane, the stockbroker, maintained a facade of composure, though mechanical precision that matched Poirot's own. Inspector Grayson had joined the party for dinner, his presence a reminder of the official investigation. He spoke little, his attention divided between his plate and the guests, as if hoping to catch a slip in their guarded demeanors. Poirot, seated at the far end, observed everything, his small, neat movements belying the whirlwind of deduction within. It was during the main course that Grayson, perhaps emboldened by the wine, broke the silence. "Mr. Poirot," he said, his tone gruff, "we've had a development. The revolver, it's been confirmed as Sir Reginald's, registered to him years ago. But there's something else. We found a partial fingerprint on the handle, not his. It's smudged, but it's enough to narrow things down." A murmur ran through the table. Victor Crane's fork paused mid-air, and Clara's glass trembled in her hand. Lady Eleanor gasped softly, while Dr. Trent's spectacles slipped down his nose. Mrs. Langston's expression remained inscrutable, though her eyes flicked briefly to Grayson. "Most interesting, Inspector," Poirot said, his voice calm but laced with curiosity. "A fingerprint, you say, and yet it is smudged. A careless murderer, perhaps, or one who wishes us to believe in their carelessness." Grayson frowned. "We're running it against the household, but it'll take time. In the meantime, Mr. Crane, your name keeps coming up. Sir Reginald mentioned discrepancies in his accounts, and you were his financial man. Care to explain?" Crane's face reddened, his voice sharp. "I've told you, Inspector, my work for Sir Reginald was above board. If there were discrepancies, they weren't my doing. Perhaps you should look at his other associates, or his family." His gaze darted to Lady Eleanor, who flinched. "Enough, Victor!" Lady Eleanor snapped, her voice breaking. "Reginald trusted you. How dare you imply—" "Peace, madame," Poirot interjected, raising a hand. "Accusations, they are like smoke. They obscure the truth. Let us focus on facts. Monsieur Crane, you were in the library until 2, oui? Did you see anyone pass by? Perhaps on their way to the study?" Crane hesitated, his eyes narrowing. "No one. The house was quiet. I was engrossed in my work." "Engrossed?" Poirot repeated, his tone neutral but probing. "And yet a man is shot not 50 yards from where you sat. Curious, no?" Before Crane could respond, Clara spoke, her voice barely audible. I did hear something last night. A creak, perhaps, around 2. I thought it was just the house settling. But now—" She trailed off, her eyes wide with fear. Poirot's gaze softened, but his questions were relentless. "Where, mademoiselle, did this creak come from? The corridor? The stairs?" Clara shook her head. Hastings, scribbling in his notebook, noted the location. The back staircase led directly to the study's corridor, a detail Poirot would surely find significant. Dr. Trent, catching Clara's glance, cleared his throat. "Old houses creak, Monsieur Poirot. It's hardly evidence." "Perhaps," Poirot said, his smile enigmatic. "But every sound, every detail, it builds the picture. Tell me, Doctor, you are a man of science. Did Sir Reginald ever speak to you of his health, his fears?" Trent adjusted his spectacles, his tone cautious. He was in good health, save for occasional stress. He mentioned no fears, though he was preoccupied lately, likely due to these financial concerns. Poirot nodded, turning to Mrs. Langston. "And you, madame? So silent, so observant. Did you sense anything amiss in Sir Reginald's demeanor?" Mrs. Langston's lips tightened. He was troubled, yes, but he kept his own counsel. "I am only a cousin, Monsieur Poirot, not privy to his innermost thoughts." The dinner concluded with little further revelation, but Hastings could sense Poirot's mind at work, sifting through the alibis, the glances, the half-truths. As the guests retired to the drawing-room for coffee, Grayson pulled Poirot aside, his voice low. "We're focusing on Crane," he confided. "His financial ties to Sir Reginald, the discrepancies. It's too neat. And that fingerprint might be his." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Neat, you say, Inspector? Too neat, perhaps. The obvious suspect, he is often the distraction. But I shall keep this in mind." As Grayson returned to his men, Poirot rejoined Hastings, his expression thoughtful. "Mon ami," he whispered, "the fingerprint. It is a red herring, I think. The murderer, they wish us to chase shadows, but the little gray cells, they see through the fog. Observe, Hastings, the tension between Mademoiselle Winthrop and Dr. Trent, the defensiveness of Monsieur Crane. There is a thread connecting them, and we shall find it." The evening wore on, and Poirot requested to inspect the study once more. With Grayson's permission, he and Hastings entered the cordoned-off room, the air still heavy with the scent of blood and gunpowder. Poirot moved with deliberate care, examining the desk, the window, the fireplace. He paused by the ledger, flipping through its pages with gloved hands. "Tiens," he said, pointing to a series of entries marked with initials, VC, EH, CW. "These sums, they are substantial, and they correspond to our guests. Loans, perhaps? Or payments?" Hastings peered over his shoulder. "Victor Crane, Eleanor Harrowby, Clara Winthrop," he said. "But what does it mean?" "It means, mon ami, that money is the pulse of this crime, but not in the way the murderer wishes us to believe." Poirot's eyes darted to the window, still ajar. He leaned out.
Window was opened.
"Why?"
To suggest an intruder, or to conceal something else. As they left the study, Poirot's attention was drawn to a small photograph on a side table, half hidden by a stack of books. It showed Sir Reginald and a younger woman, not Clara or Eleanor, smiling in a garden. "Curieux," Poirot murmured, slipping the photograph into his pocket with a handkerchief. "Another piece of the puzzle." Back in the drawing-room, the guests were restless, their nerves frayed by the day's interrogations. Poirot, however, remained serene, his mind a steel trap closing around the truth. "Hastings," he said softly, "tomorrow we shall press harder. The red herrings, they multiply, but the truth, it cannot hide forever." As the clock struck 10, the manor settled into an uneasy silence, broken only by the distant creak of floorboards. Hastings, lying awake in his room, felt a growing certainty that Poirot was closing in on the killer. But the web of deceit was intricate, and the next clue, he knew, would bring them one step closer to the shocking truth lurking within Willow Grange. Chapter 6. A Clue in Detail. The morning sun struggled through the heavy clouds over Willow Grange, casting a muted light across the manor's ancient stonework. Captain Hastings awoke with a sense of foreboding, the events of Sir Reginald Harrowby's murder weighing heavily on his mind. The dining room where he joined Hercule Poirot for breakfast was nearly deserted, save for the butler, Jenkins, who moved with a quiet efficiency that belied the chaos of the previous day. Poirot, impeccably dressed as always, sipped his coffee with an air of serene concentration, his green eyes scanning a small notebook where he had jotted down observations. "Mon ami," Poirot said, glancing up as Hastings sat down. The night, it has brought clarity to the little grey cells. The clues, they are like threads in a tapestry, each one small, but together they form the picture of truth. Hastings nodded, though his mind was still tangled with the suspect's alibis and motives. Any new insights, Poirot? That fingerprint on the revolver. Grayson seems certain it points to Crane. Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. The fingerprint, it is a distraction, Hastings. Too convenient, too smudged. No, the truth lies in the details, the small inconsistencies that the murderer cannot hide. He reached into his pocket and produced the small brass key from the study, holding it delicately. This key, for example, it unlocks more than a drawer, I think. It unlocks a secret. Before Hastings could press further, Inspector Grayson entered, his face set in a determined scowl. "Mr. Poirot, we've had the fingerprint analyzed. I'd like to speak with the guests again, to explore a certain detail that has caught my attention." Grayson grunted but agreed, and soon the drawing room was once again the stage for Poirot's meticulous inquiries. The guests, Lady Eleanor Harrowby, Victor Crane, Clara Winthrop, Dr. Malcolm Trent, and Mrs. Beatrice Langston, assembled with varying degrees of reluctance. The air was thick with tension, each suspect eyeing the others as if searching for a crack in their facades. Poirot stood before the fireplace, his small stature commanding the room. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, "yesterday we discussed alibis and motives. Today we focus on the details, the small things that reveal the truth. Let us begin with a gesture." He turned to Clara Winthrop, whose hands were clasped tightly in her lap. "Mademoiselle, last night at dinner, you spoke of hearing a creak near the back staircase at 2 o'clock. Can you describe it precisely?" Clara's cheeks flushed, her fingers twisting her pearl necklace. "It was faint, like a footstep on an old board. I thought it was nothing, just the house settling. My room is close to the staircase, so I often hear such noises." Poirot nodded, his eyes narrowing. "And yet, mademoiselle, you did not mention this creak in your first account." "Why?" Clara hesitated, her gaze flickering to Dr. Trent. I didn't think it was important at the time. I was nervous, distracted." "Précisément," Poirot said, his tone gentle but probing. "The mind, it is selective, no? But the little grey cells, they notice what is omitted." He turned to Dr. Trent, who adjusted his spectacles with a nervous twitch. "Monsieur Trent, your room is also near the back staircase. Did you hear this creak?" Trent's jaw tightened. "As I said, I was reading until midnight. I heard nothing after that. Old houses make noises. Nothing unusual." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Nothing unusual, you say? And yet a man was murdered not far from your door." He produced the photograph he had found in the study, holding it up for all to see. It showed Sir Reginald with a young woman, smiling in a garden. "This photograph. It was on a table in the study, half hidden. Who is this woman?" A ripple of unease passed through the group. Lady Eleanor's hand flew to her mouth, and Clara's eyes widened. Victor Crane's expression hardened, while Mrs. Langston's remained impassive. Dr. Trent cleared his throat. That's Margaret, Sir Reginald's niece. She passed away 2 years ago, a tragic accident." "An accident," Poirot repeated, his voice soft. "And yet her photograph is kept close, hidden among books. Why, do you think?" "Influence his actions, his finances, perhaps." Lady Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "He never spoke of it. But he was never the same after Margaret's death. He became secretive, withdrawn." Poirot nodded, slipping the photograph back into his pocket.
He then turned to the ledger he had examined the previous night, opening it to the page with initials: V.C. E.H. C.W. "These entries," he said, "they indicate sums of money, substantial sums, linked to each of you. Monsieur Crane, you are V.C., oui? What were these payments?" Crane's face reddened. "Investments, Monsieur Poirot. Sir Reginald entrusted me with managing certain funds. Those entries reflect legitimate transactions." "Legitimate," Poirot said, his tone neutral. "And yet Sir Reginald spoke of discrepancies. Were these funds perhaps misused?" Crane leapt to his feet. "I won't stand for this. My reputation—" "Sit, monsieur," Poirot said, his voice cutting through the outburst like a blade. "Your reputation, it is not my concern. The truth, however, is—" He turned to the group. "Each of you had a financial tie to Sir Reginald. Lady Eleanor, as his sister, shared in the estate's wealth. Mademoiselle Winthrop, your inheritance is under his control. Dr. Trent, you received payments for medical services. Generous payments, I think. Madame Langston, your allowance. It came from Sir Reginald's generosity, non?" The guests shifted uncomfortably, their silence louder than words. Hastings, scribbling in his notebook, noted the tension in their postures, the way Clara's eyes darted to Trent, the way Crane's hands clenched. Poirot, undeterred, continued. "But there is one detail, one small inconsistency that intrigues me. The window in the study. It was opened after 11, according to Jenkins. Yet no one admits to being near the study. And this—" He held up a small, crumpled piece of paper, retrieved from the study's wastebasket. It bore a single word: midnight. "This note," Poirot said, "was discarded. Yet it tells us something. A meeting, perhaps. A rendezvous at midnight. In the study." Clara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "I didn't write that," she said quickly. "I swear it." Poirot's eyes softened, but he pressed on. "No one accuses you, mademoiselle. But someone wrote it. Someone planned to be in that study at midnight." Inspector Grayson, growing impatient, interjected. "Mr. Poirot, this is all well and good, but we're wasting time. Crane's fingerprint, his photograph, the ledger, they are threads in a web. The creak Mademoiselle Winthrop heard, it is the key. Someone moved in the night, and that someone is our murderer." Hastings frowned. "But who, Poirot?" "They all have alibis, and the fingerprint points to Crane." "Alibis," Poirot said, "they are like masks, easily worn, easily discarded. Tomorrow we shall tighten the net. The detail, Hastings, it is always in the detail." As the manor settled into another uneasy night, Hastings lay awake, his mind racing with the clues: the key, the note, the photograph, the creak. Poirot was closing in, he knew, but the truth remained just out of reach, hidden in the shadows of Willow Grange. Chapter 7. More Lies Surface. The third morning at Willow Grange dawned with a chill that seemed to seep into the very bones of the old manor. Captain Hastings, bleary-eyed from a restless night, descended the grand staircase to find the house still cloaked in an oppressive silence. The murder of Sir Reginald Harrowby had transformed the once stately home into a labyrinth of suspicion, and Hercule Poirot's relentless probing had only deepened the unease. In the dining room, a modest breakfast was laid out, but the guests, Lady Eleanor Harrowby, Victor Crane, Clara Winthrop, Dr. Malcolm Trent, and Mrs. Beatrice Langston, picked at their food with little appetite, their faces etched with strain. Poirot, as always, was the picture of composure, his suit pristine, his mustache perfectly waxed. He sipped his coffee with deliberate care, his green eyes scanning the room. Hastings, seated beside him, could sense the detective's mind at work, piecing together the fragments of the puzzle. The smudged fingerprint, the open window, the charred letter, the mysterious note, and the photograph of the late Margaret. Each clue, Hastings knew, was a thread in the intricate tapestry Poirot was weaving. Inspector Grayson entered, his expression grim. "Mr. Poirot, we've had no luck with the fingerprint. It's too smudged for a definitive match, though Crane remains our prime suspect. But we found something else in the study, a hidden compartment in the desk containing a second ledger. It details loans, large ones, to several people in this room." A ripple of tension passed through the group. Victor Crane's jaw tightened, Clara Winthrop's hands trembled, and Lady Eleanor's eyes widened. Dr. Trent adjusted his spectacles while Mrs. Langston's face remained a mask of cold indifference. Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. "A second ledger, Inspector? Most intriguing. May I see it?" Grayson handed over a slim leather-bound book, its pages filled with meticulous entries. Poirot flipped through it, his eyes narrowing as he noted the initials and sums. V.C.
Else? Crane's face flushed. They were loans, yes, but legitimate. Sir Reginald was a generous man, lending to those he trusted. I always repaid him. Always? Poirot asked, his tone deceptively mild. And yet Sir Reginald spoke of discrepancies. Perhaps not all was repaid, no? Crane's eyes flashed with anger, but before he could respond, Lady Eleanor spoke, her voice trembling. Reginald lent me money too for personal matters, but I never asked for it. He insisted, said it was his duty as my brother. Her hands twisted her handkerchief, and Hastings noted the faint blush on her cheeks. Clara Winthrop, her voice barely audible, added, He gave me an allowance from my inheritance, but it was under his control. I never saw the full accounts. Her eyes darted to Dr. Trent, who looked away quickly. Poirot turned to the doctor. And you, Monsieur Trent, your initials, they appear here too. Medical services, perhaps, or something more personal? Trent's spectacles slipped, and he pushed them up with a nervous gesture. Sir Reginald paid me well for my services. Yes. But there was nothing improper. Mrs. Langston, silent until now, spoke in her cold, measured tone. I received an allowance, as you know, Monsieur Poirot. Reginald was generous to family, even distant ones like myself. I had no need to borrow. Poirot's gaze lingered on her, but he nodded. Merci, madame. But generosity, it can mask other motives, resentment, obligation, even blackmail. He paused, letting the word hang in the air. Let us now consider another detail. The note found in the study with the word midnight. Who wrote it and why? The group exchanged uneasy glances. Clara's hands shook, and she spoke hesitantly. I swear I didn't write it. I was in my room, as I said. Poirot's eyes softened, but his questions were relentless. And yet, mademoiselle, you heard a creak near the back staircase at 2. Could it have been someone returning from the study, perhaps after a midnight meeting? Clara's face paled. I don't know. It was just a sound. I didn't see anyone. Poirot turned to the butler, Jenkins, who stood by the door. Monsieur Jenkins, you locked up at 11, oui? Did you see anyone near the study after that? Jenkins shook his head. No, sir. The house was quiet. I checked the doors and windows as always, and retired to my quarters. Poirot nodded, then produced the photograph of Sir Reginald and Margaret. This woman, Margaret, Sir Reginald's niece, she died 2 years ago. An accident, you say,
But her photograph was kept close, hidden. Why? Lady Eleanor's voice broke.
Breath came from Dr. Trent. That's unfair, Poirot. Margaret's death was a tragedy, a fall from a horse. I attended her myself. There was no foul play. Poirot's eyes gleamed. No foul play, you say? And yet Sir Reginald kept her photograph hidden, as if it held a secret. Perhaps a secret worth killing for. The room fell silent, the weight of Poirot's words settling over the group. Hastings, scribbling in his notebook, noted the subtle shifts. Clara's nervous glance at Trent, Crane's clenched fists, Eleanor's trembling hands. Mrs. Langston alone remained unmoved, her eyes fixed on Poirot with a cold intensity. As the questioning continued, a new piece of evidence emerged. Jenkins, prompted by Poirot, recalled a detail from the night of the murder. "I forgot to mention, sir," he said, "but when I locked up, I noticed a light in the study window at 11. I assumed Sir Reginald was working late, as he often did." Poirot's eyes lit up. "A light, you say? And the window was closed at that time?" "Yes, sir," Jenkins replied, "closed and latched." "Most interesting," Poirot said, pacing slowly. "So the window was opened after 11, perhaps by the murderer, to suggest an intruder. But the light, it tells us Sir Reginald was alive at 11, working in his study, and the note, midnight, suggests a meeting." Grayson, growing impatient, interjected, "This is all speculation, Poirot. We've got Crane's fingerprint, his financial ties. He had motive and opportunity." Poirot's smile was almost pitying. "Motive, opportunity, these are the scaffolding, Inspector, not the house. The truth, it lies in the lies we uncover. And today, we have uncovered many." As the guests were dismissed, Poirot drew Hastings aside. "Mon ami," he whispered, "the ledger, the photograph, the note, they point to a web of deceit. But there is one lie, one secret that binds them all." Observe Dr. Trent and Mademoiselle Winthrop. Their glances, their hesitations, they hide something. Hastings frowned. "You think they're involved? But Trent's alibi is solid, and Clara seems too nervous to be a killer." "Nervous, oui," Poirot said, "but nervousness, it can mask guilt or fear. Tomorrow we shall press harder. The lies, they are surfacing, and with them, the truth." As the day drew to a close, the manor seemed to close in around its occupants, the creaking floors and shadowed corridors whispering secrets. Hastings, lying awake, felt the weight of the case pressing upon him. Poirot was closing in, but the murderer was still a shadow, hidden among the lies that were only now beginning to unravel. Chapter 8. The Emotional Turning Point. The fourth morning at Willow Grange broke with a heavy rain. The drops pattering against the manor's led the household like a storm cloud. Captain Hastings, his nerves frayed from sleepless nights, joined Hercule Poirot in the dining room, where the detective sat with his customary precision, sipping coffee and studying his small notebook. The other guests, Lady Eleanor Harrowby, Victor Crane, Clara Winthrop, Dr. Malcolm Trent, and Mrs. Beatrice Langston, filtered in slowly, their faces etched with exhaustion and suspicion. Poirot's green eyes gleamed with a quiet intensity, and Hastings knew his friend was closing in on a breakthrough. The clues, the smudged fingerprint, the open window, the charred letter, the midnight note, the hidden ledger, and the photograph of Margaret had woven a complex web, but Poirot's mind was a razor, slicing through the tangle with relentless precision. "Mon ami," Poirot said softly as Hastings took his seat, "today we shall see a crack in the facade. The murderer, they cannot hide forever. The heart, it betrays what the mind conceals." Before Hastings could respond, Inspector Grayson entered, his expression weary but determined. "Mr. Poirot, we've hit a dead end with the fingerprint. It's too smudged to confirm, but Crane's still our man. His financial dealings with Sir Reginald.
Those loans in the second ledger give him motive. We're searching his room today. Poirot nodded, his smile faint but knowing. Search, Inspector. But do not be blinded by the obvious. The little gray cells, they suggest another path. Let us gather the guests once more. In the drawing room, the group assembled, their postures rigid with tension. The rain outside drummed a steady rhythm, amplifying the claustrophobic atmosphere. Poirot stood before the fireplace, his small figure commanding the room. Mesdames et messieurs, he began, his voice calm but piercing. We have discussed alibis, motives, and clues. But now, we must look to the heart. Sir Reginald's death. It was not merely a matter of money. It was personal. Someone in this room harbored a secret so profound, it drove them to murder. Lady Eleanor's hands trembled, her handkerchief a crumpled mass. Victor Crane's jaw clenched, his eyes darting to the door. Clara Winthrop clutched her pearl necklace, her face pale, while Dr. Trent's spectacles slipped down his nose. Mrs. Langston, as ever, sat like a statue, her black mourning attire absorbing the light. Poirot produced the photograph of Margaret, holding it up. This woman, Margaret, Sir Reginald's niece. Her death 2 years ago changed him. Why, I ask, was her photograph hidden in the study? What secret did it hold? Lady Eleanor's voice broke the silence, raw with emotion. Reginald blamed himself for her death. He was never the same. He became obsessed with control. His wealth, his family, everything. Poirot's eyes softened. Monsieur Trent, you attended Margaret during her accident. A fall from a horse, you said. But was there more to it? Trent's face flushed, his voice sharp. I told you, it was an accident. I did everything I could. She was beyond saving. Clara, sitting beside him, let out a small sob, her hands covering her face. The room turned to her, and Hastings saw a crack in her composure, a raw vulnerability that had been hidden until now. Poirot's gaze locked onto her. Mademoiselle Winthrop, he said gently, you are troubled. Speak, I beg you. What do you know? Clara's shoulders shook, her voice barely audible. I can't. It's too much. She looked at Dr. Trent, her eyes pleading, then back at Poirot. Margaret, she wasn't just Reginald's niece. She was my friend. Her death, it wasn't just an accident. The room froze, the air thick with shock. Lady Eleanor gasped. Victor Crane's eyes widened, and Mrs. Langston's lips parted slightly, her first sign of emotion. Dr. Trent reached for Clara's hand, but she pulled away, tears streaming down her face. Explain, mademoiselle, Poirot said, his voice soft but firm. What do you mean, not just an accident? Clara's voice broke as she spoke. Reginald. He was there when she fell. He'd taken her riding, insisted on it, even though she was nervous. The horse was new, spirited. She fell, and he didn't call for help right away. He was drunk, you see. He didn't mean it, but he blamed himself. And so did I. Dr. Trent's face paled. Clara, you promised not to speak of this. It was an accident, nothing more. Enough! Clara cried, her voice rising. I've carried it for 2 years, Malcolm. I can't any more. Reginald's guilt, it consumed him. He controlled my inheritance, kept me here because he thought it would make up for Margaret, but it didn't. I hated him for it. Poirot's eyes gleamed with quiet triumph. Merci, mademoiselle. Your honesty. It is a crack in the wall of lies. But tell me, did this hatred lead you to the study at midnight? Clara shook her head fiercely. No! I was in my room, I swear it. I heard the creak, but I didn't go to the study. I couldn't face him. Poirot turned to the group, his voice measured. A secret has been revealed, but it is not the whole truth. Margaret's death, it binds this house, her memory, her loss. Someone used that pain to justify
Flies. Annoying. But they distract from the truth. Let us return to the note. Midnight. Who wrote it? And why? Mrs. Langston, silent until now, spoke in her cold, deliberate tone. Perhaps it was Reginald himself, arranging a meeting. He was secretive, as you've said. He might have invited someone to the study. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Possible, madame, but unlikely. The note was crumpled, discarded. A man planning a meeting does not throw away his own reminder. No, it was written by another, someone who wished to lure Sir Reginald, or to cover their tracks. As the questioning continued, Poirot requested Jenkins to bring a detailed floor plan of the manor, which he studied with meticulous care. The back staircase near Clara's room led directly to the study's corridor, a fact that seemed to intrigue him. The creak, he murmured to Hastings. It is the key. Someone moved in the night, and Mademoiselle Winthrop heard them. Grayson, growing restless, interrupted. Mr. Poirot, this emotional outburst is all well and good, but we need evidence. Crane's still our best bet. His fingerprint. His debts. Poirot's smile was almost pitying. The fingerprint, Inspector. It is a shadow, not the substance. The truth lies in the heart, in the pain of Margaret's death, in the secrets it spawned. We are close, Hastings, he whispered, as the guests were dismissed. Very close. As the rain continued to fall, the manor seemed to close in tighter, its walls echoing with the weight of Clara's revelation. Hastings, lying awake that night, felt the pieces of the puzzle shifting. Poirot had uncovered a wound, a motive rooted in grief and guilt, but the murderer, he knew, was still hiding, their lies unraveling under the relentless scrutiny of Hercule Poirot's little gray cells. Chapter 9. The Trap. The rain had ceased by the 5th morning at Willow Grange, leaving the air damp and heavy, as if the manor itself were holding its breath. Captain Hastings, his nerves taut from the mounting tension, joined Hercule Poirot in the dining room, where the detective sat with his usual precision, sipping coffee and reviewing his notes. The murder of Sir Reginald Harrowby had woven a web of suspicion around the household, and Clara Winthrop's emotional outburst the previous day, revealing the truth about Margaret's death, had cracked the facade of civility among the guests. Poirot's green eyes gleamed with a quiet intensity, and Hastings knew his friend was preparing to tighten the noose. "Mon ami," Poirot said, glancing up from his notebook, "today we set a trap. The murderer, they grow careless, their lies fraying at the edges. We shall apply pressure, and the truth, it will emerge." Hastings frowned, his mind still reeling from the complexities of the case. A trap, Poirot. But how? We've got the fingerprint, the ledger, the note, yet it's still unclear who's guilty. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. The clues, Hastings, they are like breadcrumbs. They lead us not to the murderer, but to their mistake. Today, we shall make them stumble. The drawing room was once again the stage for Poirot's inquiry. The guests, Lady Eleanor Harrowby, Victor Crane, Clara Winthrop, Dr. Malcolm Trent, and Mrs. Beatrice Langston, assembled in a tense semicircle. Inspector Grayson stood by the door, his patience visibly thinning. But he had agreed to let Poirot take the lead, sensing the detective's uncanny knack for unraveling mysteries. The atmosphere was electric, each guest poised as if awaiting a storm. Poirot stood before the fireplace,
his small figure radiating authority. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice soft but commanding, "we have uncovered much, debts, secrets, and the shadow of Margaret's death. But the truth, it remains just out of reach. Today, I propose a reconstruction, a little drama to jog the memory. We shall recreate the night of the murder, and perhaps someone will betray themselves." A murmur of unease rippled through the group. Lady Eleanor's hands twisted her handkerchief. Victor Crane's jaw tightened. Clara's eyes widened with fear. Dr. Trent adjusted his spectacles nervously, and Mrs. Langston's cold gaze fixed on Poirot with a flicker of defiance. "Reconstruction," Grayson said, frowning. "What's this about, Poirot?" "A simple exercise, Inspector," Poirot replied. "We know Sir Reginald was in
where she claimed to have slept under the influence of a draught. Victor Crane was placed in the library, Doctor. Trent in his room, Mrs. Langston in hers, and Clara near her door by the back staircase. Poirot, with Hastings and Grayson, moved to the study, where Jenkins was instructed to recreate his locking-up routine at 11. As Jenkins mimed checking the windows, Poirot watched closely. "The window, Monsieur Jenkins? It was closed and latched at 11, oui?" "Yes, sir," Jenkins replied. "I'm certain of it." Poirot nodded, then turned to the group, who had been summoned back to the study's corridor. "Now, let us imagine it is midnight. Someone writes a note, midnight, and delivers it to Sir Reginald. Who was it?" No one spoke, but Clara's hands trembled, and Dr. Trent's spectacles slipped again. Poirot continued, his voice relentless. "The note is crumpled, discarded. Perhaps it was a lure, to bring Sir Reginald to his desk. Or perhaps it was a reminder for the murderer. At 2, Mademoiselle Winthrop hears a creak near the staircase. Someone moves in the night." He paused, his eyes scanning the group. "Let us test this. Mademoiselle Winthrop, stand by your door. Monsieur Trent, you are in your room. Monsieur Crane, the library. Madame Langston, your room. Madame Harrowby, yours. I shall walk the corridor, and we shall see who hears what." Poirot moved silently down the corridor, his steps deliberate. As he passed the back staircase, he paused, pressing his foot against a particular floorboard. A faint creak sounded, sharp in the silence. Clara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "That's it," she whispered. "That's the sound I heard." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Précisément. The creak. It is distinctive, and it comes from the staircase leading to the study. Someone was here at 2, after the murder. But who?" Victor Crane, his voice tight, spoke up. "This proves nothing, Poirot. Anyone could have walked that corridor. You're grasping at straws." "Straws, monsieur," Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild. "No. I grasp at truth. And the truth, it is in the details." He produced the second ledger, flipping to a page marked with initials. "These loans, to you, Monsieur Crane, to Madame Harrowby, to Mademoiselle Winthrop, even to Monsieur Trent. But there is one entry, dated the night of the murder, for a sum to M.T. A large sum, marked as urgent. Monsieur Trent, explain." Trent's face paled, his hands shaking. I don't know what you mean. I received."
"Men do. And women," he added, turning to Clara. "Mademoiselle, you spoke of Margaret's death, of Sir Reginald's guilt. Did you know of this payment to Dr. Trent?" Clara shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "No, I swear. Malcolm and I, we were close,
but he never told me about any money." The room fell silent, the weight of her words sinking in. Hastings, scribbling furiously, noted the shift in dynamics, Clara's betrayal of Trent's confidence, Trent's sudden vulnerability. Poirot, sensing the moment, pressed harder. "Let us consider Margaret's death. A fall, you say, Monsieur Trent, but Mademoiselle Winthrop suggests negligence. Sir Reginald's, perhaps yours. Was there a secret there, one worth killing to protect?" Trent's face contorted, and he leapt to his feet. "Enough, Poirot! I won't be accused of murder over a tragedy I couldn't prevent. Margaret's death was an accident, and I'll not have you drag her memory through this." Poirot's voice was calm, but his eyes were steel. "Sit, monsieur. The truth, it will come, whether you wish it or not." As the group dispersed, shaken by the confrontation, Poirot drew Hastings aside. "Mon ami," he whispered, "the trap, it has worked. Dr. Trent, he is rattled. And Mademoiselle Winthrop, she has revealed a connection. The payment to MT, it is the key. Tomorrow we shall unravel the final thread." Grayson, overhearing, grunted. "You're stirring them up, Poirot, but we still need evidence." "Crane's our man, fingerprint or not." Poirot's smile was faint. "Patience, Inspector. The trap is set, and the murderer, they will fall." As night fell over Willow Grange, the manor seemed to pulse with secrets, the creaking staircase a reminder of the unseen movements in the dark. Hastings, lying awake, felt the tension mounting. Poirot's trap had shaken the suspects, but the killer remained hidden, their identity teetering on the edge of revelation. Chapter 10. The Reveal. The fifth evening at Willow Grange descended with a stillness that belied the storm of revelations brewing within its walls. The rain had cleared, leaving the air crisp and the manor's ancient stones glistening under the moonlight. Captain Hastings, his nerves taut from the mounting tension, joined Hercule Poirot in the drawing room, where the detective had requested the entire household to gather. The guests, Lady Eleanor Harrowby, Victor Crane, Clara Winthrop, Dr. Malcolm Trent, and Mrs. Beatrice Langston, sat in a tense semicircle, their faces a mixture of dread and anticipation. Brass key, the crumpled note marked midnight, and the photograph of Margaret, each a silent witness to the truth he was about to unveil. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice calm but resonant, "we have gathered to uncover the truth behind the murder of Sir Reginald Harrowby. A man was shot in his study, his own revolver turned against him in a house locked tight against the world. The clues, the fingerprint, the open window, the charred letter, the ledger, the note, the photograph, they have led us through a maze of lies. But now, the little gray cells, they have found the path." A hush fell over the room, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Hastings, his notebook open, felt his pulse quicken. Poirot's revelations were always dramatic, but this case, with its web of secrets and personal betrayals, promised a climax as shocking as any he had witnessed. "Let us begin," Poirot said, pacing slowly, "with the night of the murder. Sir Reginald was in his study at 11, as Jenkins saw the light. The window was closed and latched. At midnight, a note suggests a meeting. At 2, Mademoiselle Winthrop hears a creak near the back staircase. By morning, Sir Reginald is dead, shot at close range, the revolver beside him, the window ajar. He held up the note. This word, midnight, it was not Sir Reginald's. It was written by the murderer to lure him to his desk or to cover their tracks. The fingerprint on the revolver, smudged, points to Monsieur Crane, but it is too convenient, too incomplete. No, the murderer wished us to suspect him. Victor Crane's face reddened, but he remained silent, his hands clenched. Poirot continued, his voice relentless. The ledger. It reveals loans to Monsieur Crane, Madame Harrowby, Mademoiselle Winthrop, and Monsieur Trent. But one entry stands out. A large sum to M.T. on the night of the murder. Dr. Trent, you denied this payment. Why? Trent's spectacles slipped, his voice trembling. I told you it's a mistake. I never took money from him that night. Poirot's eyes narrowed. A mistake, monsieur? Or a lie? Let us turn to Margaret, Sir Reginald's niece. He held up the photograph. Her death, 2 years ago, was no mere accident. Mademoiselle Winthrop revealed Sir Reginald's negligence, his drunkenness, his delay in seeking help. But there is more. Dr. Trent, you attended her. You knew of Sir Reginald's fault. Did you use this knowledge? Trent's face paled, but he shook his head. I did everything I could. It was an accident. Poirot's gaze.
Mademoiselle, but you know more than you have said. He turned to the group, his voice rising. The truth, it lies in the creek at 2 o'clock. Someone moved through the house after the murder. Someone who knew the back staircase, who could slip silently to the study. He paused, his eyes locking onto Mrs. Beatrice Langston, who sat rigid, her black mourning attire like a shield. Madame Langston, Poirot said, his voice sharp, you have been silent, but your silence speaks volumes. You claim to sleep soundly, yet your room is near the back staircase. Did you hear the creak? Mrs. Langston's lips tightened, her voice cold. I heard nothing. I was asleep. No, Poirot said, stepping closer. You were not. You see, madam, the little grey cells, they have pieced it together. The photograph of Margaret. It was not just a memento. It was a reminder of a debt, a secret. Margaret was your daughter, was she not? A gasp rippled through the room. Lady Eleanor's hand flew to her mouth. Clara's sobs ceased, and Trent's spectacles fell to the floor. Victor Crane's eyes widened, and Grayson leaned forward, stunned. Mrs. Langston's face remained impassive, but her hands clenched. You have no proof, she said, her voice like ice. Proof, madam? Poirot said, his tone unrelenting. The ledger. It shows payments to B.L., not listed among the others, but there, hidden. Payments to you for years after Margaret's death. Sir Reginald paid you to keep silent, to hide the truth. Margaret was your daughter, born out of wedlock, raised as his niece to protect the family's name. Her death, it was not just negligence, it was a betrayal. You blamed Sir Reginald, and you waited, biding your time. Mrs. Langston's eyes flashed, but she said nothing. Poirot continued, his voice a crescendo. The night of the murder, you wrote the note, midnight, to ensure Sir Reginald was in his study. You took the key from his desk, unlocked the drawer, and shot him with his own revolver. You opened the window to suggest an intruder, but you made a mistake. You returned to your room via the back staircase, and Mademoiselle Winthrop heard the creak at 2. Clara's eyes widened. It was you? She whispered, her voice breaking. Mrs. Langston's composure cracked, her voice low and venomous. He killed my daughter, she said. He let her die drunk and careless, and then hid the truth. He paid me to stay silent, to live in this house like a ghost. I couldn't bear it any longer. Grayson stepped forward, his voice firm. Mrs. Langston, you're under arrest for the murder of Sir Reginald Harrowby. As the police led her away, the room erupted in murmurs. Lady Eleanor sobbed. Clap can kill Hastings, stunned.
scribbled the final details in his notebook. The case was solved. The truth laid bare in Poirot's meticulous, logical brilliance. But as Mrs. Langston was taken away, her cold eyes met Poirot's, and Hastings saw a flicker of something, defiance, perhaps, or relief. The manor, now free of its darkest secret, seemed to breathe again. But the weight of betrayal, Hastings knew, would linger long after Poirot's departure. Chapter 11. The Reflection. The morning following Mrs. Beatrice Langston's arrest cast Willow Grange in a subdued light, the manor's ancient walls seeming to exhale a collective sigh of relief. The rain had given way to a pale, watery sun, its rays filtering through the leaded windows and illuminating the dust motes that danced in the air. Captain Hastings, still reeling from Hercule Poirot's dramatic revelation the previous evening, joined his friend in the drawing room, where the detective sat with a cup of tea, his expression one of quiet satisfaction. The other guests, Lady Eleanor Harrowby, Victor Crane, Clara Winthrop, and Dr. Malcolm Trent, had gathered for breakfast, but their absence now spoke of a desire to process the shocking truth in solitude. "Mon ami," Poirot said, glancing up as Hastings took a seat. "The case, it is resolved. Yet the heart, it lingers on the tragedy. The little gray cells, they have done their work, but the human cost, c'est toujours poignant." Hastings nodded, his notebook open but untouched. The image of Mrs. Langston's cold, defiant eyes as she was led away haunted him. "It was brilliant, Poirot, the way you unraveled it all. The note, the creak, the hidden payments. But how did you know it was her? She was so composed." Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile, his fingers adjusting his perfectly waxed mustache. "The composure, Hastings. It was her mask. The murderer, they always betray themselves, not in what they say, but in what they do not. Madame Langston, she was too silent, too controlled. Her mourning attire, it was not merely for her husband, but for her daughter, Margaret, a secret she guarded with a mother's ferocity." He sipped his tea, his eyes distant. "Let us reflect, mon ami, on the path to the truth. The clues, they were many, but each pointed to the heart of the matter. The note, midnight. It was written to ensure Sir Reginald was in his study, alone. The window, opened after the murder, was a clumsy attempt to suggest an intruder, but the undisturbed grounds betrayed it. The fingerprint on the revolver, smudged and convenient, was meant to cast suspicion on Monsieur Crane. But the ledger, the payments to BL, they were the key. Sir Reginald's guilt over Margaret's death drove him to pay Madame Langston, to silence her, to keep the family's name untarnished. And she—
"But the creak Clara heard. How did you know it was Mrs. Langston on the staircase?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The back staircase, it is narrow, its boards old and creaky. Mademoiselle Winthrop's room is closest, and her testimony, though hesitant, was precise. The creak at 2 o'clock, it was not someone approaching the study, but returning from it. Madame Langston, her room near the staircase, could slip down, commit the deed, and return unnoticed. Her alibi, so perfect, so unassailable, was her mistake. No one sleeps so soundly in a house of secrets." Hastings shook his head, marveling at Poirot's logic. "And the photograph of Margaret, how did you know she was Mrs. Langston's daughter?" "The photograph, it was hidden, yet cherished," Poirot said. "Sir Reginald kept it close, a reminder of his guilt." "But Madame Langston's reaction when I showed it, her silence, her rigidity, it spoke of a deeper connection. The payments to BL in the ledger, they were not for charity, but for silence. Margaret, born out of wedlock, was raised as Sir Reginald's niece to protect the family's reputation. Her death, caused by his negligence, was the wound that festered in Madame Langston's heart." The drawing-room door opened,
and Lady Eleanor entered, her face pale but composed. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice soft, "I owe you my thanks. You've brought justice to my brother, though the truth, it is painful." Poirot inclined his head. "Madam, the truth, it is often painful, but it is necessary. Sir Reginald, he was a man of flaws, but he did not deserve death. Your grief, it is understood." Lady Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "Beatrice, I never knew about Margaret. Reginald kept so many secrets. If only he had told me." "Secrets," Poirot said. "They are the seeds of tragedy. But now they are laid bare, and you may heal." As Lady Eleanor withdrew, Clara Winthrop appeared, her youthful face drawn but resolute. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice trembling, "I was wrong to keep silent about Margaret. I was afraid, but you've freed me from that fear. Thank you." Poirot's expression softened. "Mademoiselle, your courage in speaking of Margaret's death, it was the crack that broke the dam. You have nothing to reproach yourself for." Clara nodded, wiping her eyes, and left quietly. Dr. Trent followed.
Truth, it absolves as much as it condemns. As Trent departed, Victor Crane entered, his usual bravado tempered by relief. "Poirot, I thought you had me pegged for it. That fingerprint, I swear I never touched that gun." Poirot's smile was faint. "The fingerprint, monsieur, was a distraction. The murderer used gloves, but left a smudge to implicate you. Your debts, they made you a convenient scapegoat." Crane shook his head. "I'll be more careful who I work for in the future." As the guests dispersed, Inspector Grayson approached, his gruff demeanor softened by grudging respect. "You've done it again, Poirot. I was sure it was Crane, but you saw through the smoke and mirrors. How do you do it?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "The little gray cells, Inspector. They see what the heart hides. The murderer, they rely on emotion, anger, grief, betrayal. But logic, it is the light that reveals all." Grayson nodded, tipping his hat. "Well, you've got my thanks. We'll take it from here." As the inspector left to finalize Mrs. Langston's transfer to custody, Poirot turned to Hastings, his expression thoughtful. "Mon ami, each case, each teaches us something. Here, we see the danger of secrets, of guilt left to fester. Sir Reginald, he sought to control his world, but in doing so, he sowed the seeds of his destruction." Hastings closed his notebook, his mind heavy with the weight of the case. "It's a sad business, Poirot. Mrs. Langston, she lost her daughter, her dignity. I almost pity her." "Pity, oui," Poirot said, rising and adjusting his coat. But justice, it must prevail. Come, Hastings, our work here is done. The train to London awaits, and I long for the symmetry of my apartment." As they stepped out into the crisp morning air, the manor behind them seemed to settle, its secrets laid bare. Poirot, his cane tapping lightly on the gravel, walked with the quiet confidence of a man who had once again brought order to chaos. Hastings, following, felt a familiar awe for his friend's genius, and a quiet resolve to face whatever mystery lay ahead. Chapter 12. The Aftermath. The 6th morning at Willow Grange greeted Captain Hastings with a stillness that felt almost unnatural after the storm of revelations that had culminated in Mrs. Beatrice Langston's arrest. The manor, bathed in the pale light of an overcast sky, seemed to have shed its oppressive weight, yet a lingering melancholy hung in the air. Hastings joined Hercule Poirot in the dining room, where the detective sat with his customary precision, a cup of steaming coffee before him, his small notebook
open to a page filled with meticulous notes. The other guests, Lady Eleanor Harrowby, Victor Crane, Clara Winthrop, and Dr. Malcolm Trent, were absent, their absence a testament to the emotional toll of the previous evening's denouement. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his green eyes lifting from of truth.
They continue to spread. The human heart, it does not so easily forget betrayal, even when justice is served. Hastings nodded, stirring his tea absently. It's a grim affair, Poirot. Mrs. Langston's confession, her pain over Margaret's death. It's hard to see her as just a murderer. She was a mother, driven to desperation. Poirot's lips curved into a faint, wistful smile. Oui, Hastings. The heart, it is a complex thing. It loves, it grieves, it seeks vengeance. But we, who seek the truth, must not be swayed by pity alone. The little gray cells, they see beyond emotion, to the facts. As they spoke, Lady Eleanor entered, her auburn hair neatly pinned, but her eyes red-rimmed from sleeplessness. She approached Poirot with a hesitant grace, her voice soft. Monsieur Poirot, I cannot thank you enough. You've brought clarity to a darkness I scarcely understood. But Beatrice, my cousin, she was always so distant. I never knew about Margaret. Poirot inclined his head, his expression sympathetic but composed. Madame, secrets, they are like shadows. They grow long in silence. Sir Reginald's decision to hide Margaret's parentage, it was meant to protect, but it wounded deeply. Madame Langston's crime, it was born of that wound. Lady Eleanor's hands trembled as she clutched a lace handkerchief. If only Reginald had told me, I could have helped, perhaps prevented this tragedy. Perhaps, Poirot said gently, but the past, it cannot be undone. You must now look to the future, to heal this house and its memories. As Lady Eleanor withdrew, Clara Winthrop appeared, her youthful face pale but resolute. She carried a small bundle of letters, tied with a ribbon, which she placed before Poirot. These were Margaret's, she said, her voice steady, despite the tears in her eyes. I found them in my room this morning, hidden in a drawer. They're letters she wrote to me, before the accident. I thought you should see them. Poirot took the bundle with care, his gloved fingers untying the ribbon. He scanned the letters, his eyes narrowing as he read. Most interesting, mademoiselle. These letters, they speak of her love for you, her friend, but also of her fear, of Sir Reginald's temper, of his drinking. They confirm what you told us, that her death was no simple accident. Clara nodded, wiping her eyes. I should have spoken sooner. I was afraid of him, of what it meant. But you've given me courage, Monsieur Poirot. I can move forward now. Poirot's gaze softened. Courage,
Monsieur Trent, silence. It is rarely harmless. Your secret, it did not kill Sir Reginald, but it fed the shadows that led to his death. You must live with that knowledge. Trent nodded, his shoulders sagging, and departed quietly. Victor Crane was the last to approach, his usual confidence tempered by a wary respect. Poirot, you had me fooled. I thought I was done for, with that fingerprint and the ledger. You saved me from a noose I didn't deserve. Poirot's smile was faint. The noose, Monsieur Crane, it was never for you. The murderer, they used you as a shield, but the little gray cells, they see through such tricks. Be mindful, however, of your dealings. Honesty, it is the better path. Crane gave a wry nod and left, leaving Poirot and Hastings alone. The detective closed his notebook, his fingers lingering on the cover. Mon ami, he said. "This case, it reminds us of the fragility of trust. Sir Reginald sought to control his world, his wealth, his family, his secrets. But control, it is an illusion. The truth, it always finds a way." Hastings leaned back, his mind heavy with the case's complexities. "It's a lesson, Poirot. But what now? The police have Mrs. Langston, and the manor feels empty." "Empty, oui," Poirot said, rising and adjusting his coat. "But emptiness, it allows for new beginnings. The police, they will handle Madame Langston's trial. We, however, have done our part. The train to London awaits, and I long for the order of my little apartment." As they prepared to depart, Inspector Grayson entered, his gruff demeanor softened by gratitude. "Poirot, you've made my job easier, though I'll never admit it publicly. That trap you set, brilliant. How did you know it was her?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "The little gray cells, Inspector. They see the pattern, the note, the creak, the hidden payments. Madame Langston's silence, it was her loudest confession. The heart, it betrays what the mind conceals." Grayson tipped his hat. "Well, you've got my respect. Safe travels, gentlemen." As Poirot and Hastings stepped into the gravel drive, the manor loomed behind them, its secrets laid bare, but its wounds still raw. The hired car waited to take them to the station, and Poirot paused, gazing at the ancient willows that framed the estate. "Hastings," he said softly, "each case, it is a mirror to the soul. Here we saw grief, guilt, and vengeance. But we also saw truth, and that, it is our purpose." Hastings nodded, climbing into the car beside his friend. As they drove away, the manor receded into the distance, its silhouette a fading echo of the tragedy within. Poirot, his cane resting across his knee, hollow.
The arrest of Mrs. Beatrice Langston had lifted the suffocating veil of suspicion from the manor. Yet, the echoes of her confession lingered, casting a somber pall over the household. As Hastings descended the grand staircase, the creaking floorboards seemed to whisper of the secrets they had borne witness to. In the dining room, Hercule Poirot sat alone, his pristine suit and perfectly waxed mustache, a stark contrast to the subdued atmosphere. He was reviewing his small notebook, his green eyes gleaming with the satisfaction of a case resolved, though tempered by a reflective melancholy. "Mon ami," Poirot said, looking up as Hastings joined him, "the truth, it has been uncovered. But the heart, it does not so easily heal. The threads of this tragedy, they are many, and we must now tie them neatly before we depart." Hastings nodded, pouring himself a cup of tea. "It's a grim business, Poirot. Mrs. Langston's motive, her daughter's death, Sir Reginald's negligence. It's hard to see her as just a villain. And the others, they're all carrying their own burdens now." Poirot's lips curved into a faint, wistful smile. "Oui, Hastings. The human soul, it is a tapestry of light and shadow. Madame Langston's crime was born of love, twisted into vengeance. But the others, Lady Eleanor, Mademoiselle Winthrop, Monsieur Trent, even Monsieur Crane, they too are marked by this affair. Let us reflect, and perhaps offer them a path to peace." As they spoke, Lady Eleanor Harrowby entered, her auburn hair neatly pinned, but her face drawn with fatigue. She carried a small, leather-bound diary, which she placed before Poirot with a hesitant hand. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice soft but steady, "this was Reginald's. I found it in his study this morning, tucked behind a bookshelf. I thought you should see it before you leave." Poirot took the diary with care, his gloved fingers flipping through its pages. The entries were sparse but revealing, detailing Sir Reginald's growing paranoia about his finances and his guilt over Margaret's death. One passage, dated a week before the murder, caught Poirot's eye.
Beatrice haunts me with her silence. I owe her more than money can repay, but I cannot undo the past. The loans, they are my penance, but they will not buy forgiveness. Poirot closed the diary, his expression sombre. Madame, this confirms what we suspected. Sir Reginald's guilt. It was his prison. He sought to atone through payments, but it only fueled Madame Langton's rage. Lady Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. If I had known about Margaret, I could have helped. I failed him as a sister. Poirot's gaze softened. No, madame, you loved your brother. Determination in her eyes. Monsieur Poirot, she said, I've decided to leave Willow Grange. My inheritance, whatever's left of it, I'll use to start anew. Margaret would have wanted me to live, not dwell in this place of sorrow. Poirot nodded, his smile gentle. A wise choice, mademoiselle. The manor. It holds memories, but you are young, and your life, it is ahead. Go with courage. Clara hesitated, then added, Dr. Trent. He's asked to write to me. He feels responsible, you know, for keeping Reginald's secrets. Should I forgive him? Poirot's eyes twinkled. Forgiveness, mademoiselle. It is not for me to dictate. But consider this. Monsieur Trent, he acted out of loyalty, misguided though it was. If his heart is true, perhaps there is a path forward. As Clara left, Doctor, Malcolm Trent entered, his spectacles polished but his demeanour heavy with remorse. Monsieur Poirot, he said, I've been thinking about what you said, about silence feeding the shadows. I should have spoken up about Margaret's parentage, about the payments. My silence hurt Clara, and I regret it. Poirot's expression was stern but compassionate. Monsieur Trent, regret. It is the first step to redemption. You cared for Mademoiselle Winthrop, and that care, it may yet mend what was broken. Be honest with her, and with yourself. Trent nodded, his shoulders straightening slightly, and departed. Victor Crane was the last to approach, his usual bravado replaced by a quiet introspection. Poirot, he said, I've been cleared, but this business has shaken me. Those loans in the ledger, I repaid them. But I pushed Reginald too hard, made him doubt me. I'm not blameless. Poirot's gaze was steady. Monsieur Crane, none are blameless in a house of secrets. But you are free to choose a better path. Let this be a lesson in trust, not suspicion. As Crane left, Inspector Grayson entered, his gruff demeanour softened by a rare smile. Poirot, the paperwork's done. Mrs. Langston's been transferred to Market Drayton for trial. Your work here, it saved us months of chasing false leads. Poirot inclined his head. Messy, Inspector. The little grey cells, they serve justice, not glory. But tell me, what of Madame Langston? How does she fare? Grayson's smile faded. She's silent, mostly. Admitted to the shooting, but says little else. Claims it was for Margaret. Hard to argue with a mother's grief, but the law's the law. Poirot nodded, his expression thoughtful. The law, vengeance. And we seek truth, that it may bring order to chaos. Hastings closed his own notebook, his mind heavy with the case's complexities. It's a lesson, Poirot, but a hard one. The manor feels like a ghost now, with all its secrets laid bare. Oui, Poirot said, rising and adjusting his coat. But ghosts, they fade in time. Come, Hastings. Our train awaits. London calls, and I long for the symmetry of my little apartment, where order reigns. As they stepped into the gravel drive, the manor loomed behind them, its ancient willows swaying gently in the breeze. Poirot's cane tapped lightly on the ground, a rhythm of finality. Hastings, following, felt a familiar awe for his friend's genius, tempered by a quiet sadness for the lives touched by this tragedy. The car to the station awaited, and as they drove away, Willow Grange receded into the distance, its story of betrayal and redemption etched into their memories. Chapter 14. The Final Threads. The 8th morning at Willow Grange brought a fragile calm, as if the manor, stripped of its darkest secret, was tentatively rediscovering its rhythm. The pale sunlight filtered through the ancient willows, casting dappled patterns on the gravel drive where Captain Hastings stood, his suitcase packed and ready for the journey back to London. Hercule Poirot, ever impeccable in his tailored suit and polished shoes, adjusted his hat with a precise flick, his green eyes surveying the manor with a mixture of satisfaction and melancholy. The arrest of Mrs. Beatrice Langston had closed the case of Sir Reginald Harrowby's murder, but the emotional aftermath lingered, a quiet undercurrent in the house's creaking corridors. "Mon ami," Poirot said, turning to Hastings as they waited for their hired car. "The case, it is complete, yet the heart of Willow Grange, it beats with the scars of truth. We have unraveled the threads, but they will never be fully mended." Hastings nodded, his thoughts heavy with the revelations of the past days. "It's a sad affair, Poirot. Mrs. Langston's pain, the secrets about Margaret. It's hard to see where justice ends and tragedy begins." Poirot's lips curved into a faint, reflective smile. "Oui, Hastings, justice. It is a cold companion to grief. But we, who seek the truth, must follow where it leads, even when it wounds. Come, let us take a final turn through the house before we depart. There are farewells to be made." They re-entered the manor, its grand hall now seeming less imposing, its ancestral portraits gazing down with a muted solemnity. In the drawing room, Lady Eleanor Harrowby sat alone, her auburn hair neatly pinned, though her eyes betrayed sleepless nights. She rose as Poirot and Hastings entered, a small leather-bound book in her.
Reginald's diary again. It's painful, but it helps me understand him, his guilt, his need to control. I plan to stay at Willow Grange, to make it a home again, not a place of secrets. Poirot inclined his head, his expression one of quiet approval. A noble endeavor, madame. The manor, it has seen much sorrow, but with care, it may yet know joy. You have strength, and that is enough. Lady Eleanor's lips trembled, but she managed a smile. Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. Your clarity, it's given me a path forward. As they spoke, Clara Winthrop entered, her youthful face brighter than it had been, though still touched by sorrow. She carried a small bouquet of wildflowers, picked from the manor's gardens. Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, she said. These are for you, a thank you, for freeing us from this nightmare. I leave for London tomorrow, to start anew. I'll never forget Margaret, but I want to live for her, not in her shadow. Poirot took the bouquet with a gentle bow. Mademoiselle, your courage, it is a light in the darkness. Margaret, she would be proud. Go, and build a life of truth. Clara's eyes glistened, and she nodded before stepping back. Dr. Malcolm Trent followed, his spectacles gleaming but his demeanor subdued. Monsieur Poirot, he said, I've written to Clara, as she told you. I've confessed everything, my silence about Margaret, the payments. I hope she can forgive me. Poirot's gaze was steady but kind. Monsieur Trent, forgiveness, it is a gift, not a guarantee. But honesty, it is the first step. You have taken it, and that is well. Trent hesitated, then extended his hand. Thank you, Poirot. You've shown me what silence can cost. Poirot shook his hand, a rare gesture of camaraderie. As Trent withdrew, Victor Crane appeared,
his usual swagger tempered by a newfound humility. "Poirot, Hastings," he said, "I'm heading back to the city too. This business has made me rethink things, my work, my priorities. I owe you for keeping me out of the dock." Poirot's smile was faint but knowing. "Monsieur Crane, the dock, it was never your fate. But heed this, wealth, it is a tool, not a master. Use it wisely." Crane nodded, a wry grin crossing his face. "I'll try, Poirot. Safe travels." As the guests dispersed, Jenkins, the butler, approached, his stooped figure moving with quiet dignity. "Monsieur Poirot, sir, the household owes you a great debt. You've restored order to Willow Grange, though it cost us dearly." Poirot inclined his head. "Monsieur Jenkins, order, it is the foundation of peace. You have served this house well. Continue to do so." Jenkins bowed slightly and retreated, leaving Poirot and Hastings alone.
Reminds us that truth, it is both a liberator and a burden. Hastings closed his notebook, its pages filled with the details of the case. "It's a lesson, Poirot. But what of Mrs. Langston? She's facing trial. But her story, it's heartbreaking." Poirot's eyes softened. "Oui, her pain, it is profound. But justice, it does not bend for pity. Madame Langston chose her path, and now she must walk it. We, however, have done our part." As they stepped outside, the hired car awaited, its engine humming softly. Poirot paused, gazing at the manor's facade, its stone walls now bathed in the soft morning light. "Willow Grange," he murmured. "It will heal. In time. But the scars, they remain, a reminder of the cost of secrets." Hastings followed Poirot into the car, his mind heavy with the weight of the case. The drive to the station was quiet, the countryside rolling past in a blur of green and gold. Poirot, his cane resting across his knees, seemed lost in thought, his little grey cells already turning to the next challenge, though his expression held a trace of the melancholy that lingered from Willow Grange. As the manor faded into the distance, Hastings felt a mix of relief and sorrow. Poirot had brought order to chaos, as he always did, but the human toll of the case, the broken bonds, the hidden truths, would stay with him. The train to London awaited, and with it, the promise of new mysteries. But for now, the memory of Willow Grange and its tangled web of betrayal and redemption lingered like a shadow in the morning light. Chapter 15. The Departure. The final morning at Willow Grange was cloaked in a gentle mist, the kind that softened the edges of the ancient manor and lent an ethereal quality to its weathered stones. Captain Arthur Hastings stood on the gravel drive, his suitcase at his feet, watching as the last of the autumn leaves drifted from the willows. The resolution of Sir Reginald Harrowby's murder had brought a fragile peace to the household, but the scars of betrayal, grief, and hidden truths lingered in the air like the mist itself. Hercule Poirot, impeccable as ever in his tailored suit and polished shoes, adjusted his hat with a precise flick, his green eyes reflecting a quiet satisfaction, tempered by the weight of human tragedy. "Mon ami," Poirot said, turning to Hastings as they awaited their car to the station. "The case of Willow Grange? It is closed, yet its lessons, they remain. The little grey cells, they have brought order, but the heart, it carries the burden of truth." Hastings nodded, his thoughts heavy with the events of the past week. "It's a strange feeling, Poirot. Wounds of the soul. That, it is for time and courage to mend." Before they could continue, Lady Eleanor Harrowby emerged from the manor, her auburn hair neatly pinned, her face pale but resolute. She carried a small velvet box, which she offered to Poirot with a trembling hand. "Monsieur Poirot,
she said, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. "This was Reginald's, a pocket watch he cherished. I want you to have it, as a token of our gratitude. You've given us clarity, however painful." Poirot took the box with a gentle bow, opening it to reveal a polished silver watch, its face engraved with the Harrowby crest. "Madame," he said, "your generosity, it is most touching. I accept this not for myself, but for the truth we have served. May Willow Grange find peace under your care." Lady Eleanor's eyes glistened, but she managed a nod. "I'll try, monsieur. I'll make this house a home again, for Reginald's memory, and for Margaret's." As she withdrew, Clara Winthrop appeared, her youthful face brighter than it had been, though still touched by sorrow. She held a folded letter, which she handed to Hastings. "Captain Hastings," she said, "this is for you both. It's a note of thanks and a promise. I'm leaving for London today to start fresh. I'll carry Margaret with me, but I won't let her death define me." Hastings took the letter, his heart warmed by her resolve. "You're a brave young woman, Miss Winthrop. Poirot and I wish you all the best." Poirot inclined his head. "Mademoiselle, your strength, it is a testament to the human spirit. Go and live well." Clara smiled, a tear escaping, and stepped back. Dr. Malcolm Trent followed, his spectacles gleaming, his demeanor a mix of remorse and determination. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," he said, "I've decided to stay in the village, to serve as its doctor. Clara and I will keep in touch. I want to make amends for my silence, to be a better man." Poirot's gaze was kind but piercing. "Monsieur Trent, the path to redemption, it is paved with honesty. You have begun well. Continue, and you may yet find peace." Trent nodded, shaking their hands before retreating. Victor Crane was the last to approach, his usual confidence softened by a newfound humility. "Poirot, Hastings," he said, "I'm off to London too to rebuild my business, honestly this time. You saved me from a false accusation, and I won't forget it." Poirot's smile was faint but approving. "Monsieur Crane, honesty, it is the foundation of trust. Build upon it, and you will not falter." As Crane departed, Jenkins the butler appeared, his stooped figure moving with quiet dignity. "Monsieur Poirot, sir," he said, "the household is forever in your debt. You've restored order this house, and it will care for you." With farewells complete, Poirot and Hastings stepped into the waiting car, the Manor's silhouette receding as they drove toward the station. The countryside rolled past, its fields and hedgerows a blur of green and gold under the misty sky. Poirot, his cane resting across his knees, gazed out the window, his expression thoughtful. "Mon ami," he said at last, "this case, it has been a mirror to the complexities of the human heart. Sir Reginald, he sought to control his world, his wealth, his family, his secrets, but control, it is a fleeting illusion. Madame Langston, her love for her daughter became her vengeance. And the others, Lady Eleanor, Mademoiselle Winthrop, Monsieur Trent, Monsieur Crane, they each carry their own burdens, their own lessons." Hastings leaned back, the weight of the case settling in his chest. "It's a reminder, Poirot, that secrets can destroy as much as they protect. I can't help but feel for Mrs. Langston, despite her crime. She lost everything. She lost everything." Poirot's eyes softened. Her grief, it was her prison, long before the law claimed her. But we, Hastings, we serve the truth, not sentiment. The little grey cells, they see what the heart obscures. And in that clarity, we find justice. As the train station came into view, Hastings felt a familiar mix of awe and melancholy. Poirot's genius had once again brought order to chaos. But the human cost, the shattered lives, the unspoken grief, lingered like the mist over Willow Grange. The train to London awaited, its whistle cutting through the quiet morning. And as they boarded, Poirot's posture remained erect, his mind already turning to the next challenge. "Hastings," Poirot said, settling into their compartment. "London, it calls us back to its symmetry, its order. But the world, it is never without its mysteries. We shall be ready, no?" Hastings smiled, closing his notebook with a sense of finality. "Always, Poirot." As the train pulled away, Willow Grange faded into the distance, its secrets laid bare, its story complete. The wheels clacked rhythmically, carrying them towards the bustle of London, where new puzzles awaited the indomitable Hercule Poirot and his steadfast companion, ready to face whatever shadows the future might hold.